Okay, hello and welcome to today's CAHRS webcast. So my name is Brad Bell. I am the William J. Conady Professor of Strategic Human Resources in the ILR School here at Cornell. I also serve as the Academic Director of the Center, so I'm really excited to have all of you here. I'm particularly excited about today's webcast because honestly, it follows a somewhat different format than you may be used to if you've attended some of our webcasts in the past. Typically, our webcasts feature our Cornell faculty or sometimes our students sharing out various insights from the work they've been doing. But today, we're actually going to be showcasing one of our CAHRS partner companies that I'm sure many, if not all of you, are very familiar with, and that is Workday. During this time of nearly constant and fast-paced change, companies are quickly recognizing that the HR systems and processes that have served them for so long, so well, are probably due for a refresh and an update. And probably nowhere is this more true than in the talent space, as we look to really align our talent strategies with our evolving business strategies. The talent space is also particularly ripe for refresh due to the shifting expectations of employees around things like flexibility, transparency, and really their desire for a work environment that prioritizes and emphasizes their own career growth and development. Of course, as we modernize our talent strategies, we also need to think about how we can support and scale those changes through technology. This is where I think the Workday case that we'll be examining today is particularly fascinating. How did a company that is renowned for its HR technology solutions leverage its own platform to really implement and support a new talent philosophy? Joining us today to share this story is Roxanne Henselman, who is VP of Talent Management and Talent Development, People, and Purpose at Workday. Roxanne joined Workday in 2017 and spent 7 years as an HR business partner leader for Workday's go-to-market functions. In June 2024, she transitioned to lead the talent management and development functions and is responsible for embedding Workday's talent philosophy across their talent programs. Previously at JDSU, Via Solutions, she spent 10 years building a foundation in HR communications, employee engagement, and culture initiatives before becoming an HR VP for the general and administrative functions. She began her career at Gap Inc., where she focused on communications and change management for Banana Republic. I think I'm actually wearing a Banana Republic shirt today. She lives in Denville, California with her two sons and their pet gecko. So before I turn things over to Roxanne to share the Workday story, I want to highlight just a few quick housekeeping items. First, following today's session, we will share a copy of the webcast recording with all of you in case there's anything that you want to revisit. Certainly would encourage you to share it with others in your organization or colleagues that might also be interested in today's discussion. Secondly, really want to encourage you to participate in today's webcast by submitting your questions. You can do that through the Q&A feature here in Zoom, and I would encourage you to do that at any point throughout our discussion. As questions come in, I'll be monitoring them. I might present Roxanne with some of those as we're going along, but we've certainly left some time at the end of today's session to answer some of those questions. So with that, Roxanne, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Brad, for that wonderful introduction and setup for today's conversation. I'm really excited to be here and share. And with that, I'll share my screen. You can see things, Brad?
Yes.
All right. That's great. So one thing that Brad didn't mention is that one of the best parts of my role at Workday is talking to customers about how we leverage Workday internally to achieve our talent objectives. We tend to look at talent through what I'm calling the 3 Ps. We're looking at it from a philosophy, a practice, and then the product, and that's the Workday product perspective. And we look at these 3 Ps when we're designing and delivering talent programs to our over 20,000 workmates globally. In this regard, I'm also a customer like you in many ways. I'm understanding new functionality when it's released, how it will complement what we're already doing, evaluating the degree of change involved, leveraging my HRIS colleagues to understand requirements and configuration options. And while I love our Workday product, I am not in there doing the configuration. And so while, as Brad mentioned, we'll ask for questions along the way, and I do have screenshots of what our talent practices look like in our Workday tenant. I am probably not the best person to answer questions that are highly technical in nature. So with that preamble, let's dive in. So going back to 2022, we were coming out of the COVID pandemic, and a clear business priority was, and still is today, accelerating profitable growth by executing with speed and agility. We recognized that we really needed high performance at scale. So the question was, how do we strengthen our performance mindset throughout the business? At the same time, we were digging into what was important for our employees. Like many of you, we'd been investing in employee well-being, navigating, remote work and returning to the office. And what we found through our employee listening tool, Workday Peakon Employee Voice, is a strong correlation and desire for career growth. So ability to grow skills is highly correlated with satisfaction and retention. Clarity on how to advance careers was top of mind for our workmates, and connecting development to performance was a key ask from both our workmates and our people leaders. We found that employees who were leaving were 3 times more likely to be dissatisfied with growth, which is a primary driver in our Peakon survey, and its 3 sub-drivers when compared with peers who were not leaving the organization. We realized that our talent strategy just wasn't doing enough to meet the needs of the business and the needs of our employees. Many of our workmates had joined the company when we were fully remote. We were growing fast in multiple countries and exponentially in size through M&A as well, with thousands of new employees joining during those COVID years. In fact, over 40% of our workforce was new since 2020. And we had not clearly defined how we would manage talent. In fact, we often used the words freedom within a framework, and this led to inconsistent talent adoption or talent practice adoption. We had managed attrition that was under industry benchmark. I'd also add here that for the first time, we were seeing an increase in regrettable attrition of tenured workmates. We lacked differentiated rewards, and we felt that there was a need for transparency in how we set expectations and managed performance. So getting participation and buy-in from our executives from the start was essential. With Anil as our CEO at the time, and as a true values-led organization, we traditionally had their attention when we would come and raise a flag to take a closer look and see where we might be off course. In the fall of 2022, we impressed upon them a need to refresh our values and actions to be more current with where we were in our evolution, since they hadn't been refreshed in many years. And also to get clear on how we manage talent across the enterprise in service of achieving our business objectives. Our talent philosophy is centered around 6 different dimensions. For each of these, we documented our current state and where we wanted to be. And I'd say on every single one of these, we really wanted to move the needle. This involved getting clear on some tough questions. And through interviews with our executive committee and a lot of our senior leadership team, we asked the hard questions around how transparent should we be? Should we share ratings? What do we do if we have a poor performing leader who's loved by their team? And just as importantly on behavior, holding a high bar on the how we delivered is as important as the what, and that we just have little tolerance for jerks who were high performers. With these 6 dimensions in mind, we've taken action the past 2 years to redesign our talent practices to be in alignment with this talent philosophy. And when we zoom out, we feel that there are 3 essential ingredients to our special culture. And this is really how we articulate our people commitment to all of our workmates globally. And it drives everything that we do. That we are driven by our values, invested in our workmates, and powered for performance, with people at the center of all of our work. This translates into what I'm going to dive into, which is our 3 high-impact talent practices. If you had a chance to take a look at the case study that we published at the start of the year with Talent Strategy Group, we talk about how we've created our talent cycle around setting goals, having frequent check-ins, and then assessing performance and potential at the end of our calendar year. This is what Workday's talent cycle looks like. Our fiscal year starts in February, so we start off strong with setting goals. We're doing check-ins at the end of our first 3 quarters. Then we take a break from check-ins in our 4th quarter, and that is when our people leaders assess performance and potential of all the individuals on their teams. We calibrate those ratings, and we move into our compensation planning process following that. So I'm going to take a pause here, Brad, and just see, now that we've been through the philosophy journey portion, if there's any questions or anything for us to chat about before I move forward.
Yes, so a couple questions. One I can answer. Where can we find the case study that you just alluded to? That was
Yeah.
kind of linked to this session, but when we kind of circle back with a copy of the recording, we'll be sure to attach that case study so those of you interested can take a look at it. Another question that came in, Roxanne, was you referenced some of the challenges you were facing. One was around this idea of inconsistent talent practice adoption. Can you talk
Mhm.
a little bit more about that, or maybe provide some examples of how that was kind of manifesting within Workday?
For sure. Yeah, we had a lot of what we would say was, HR suggested, strongly encouraged a lot of our people practices, right? So we would um, tell our people leaders that setting goals was a good thing, but we didn't have like an enterprise approach to setting goals. We didn't say that it was an expectation that individuals set goals. And, I'm a strong believer in goals, and we'll go into goals here shortly, but if you don't have goals, then, it raises up other issues downstream when there's a performance issue or when you need to evaluate and assign someone a rating at the end of the year. So there was a lot of things that the HR team felt was what we should be doing, but we didn't have the expectations around these practices, whether it was giving feedback or having development items, or having regular check-ins. We weren't seeing the consistency there. So in some pockets of the organization, it was happening. In other parts, it wasn't. And then what that leads to is an inconsistent experience for workers. I work for Brad, I'm having this great experience. We're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing, all the, routines that really, kind of underpin performance. Maybe I work for Roxanne and like she doesn't do any of that stuff, and in that regard, an individual is going to have a very different experience, based on who their people leader is. So we really felt the need to create consistency and commonality around how we manage talent.
Great, super helpful. Another question that came in, I think it's in reference to the slide that you have up right now.
Yeah.
Can you help us understand check-in conversations versus documented performance achievement against goals? Or maybe that's something you'll get more into when you start talking about the
Yeah.
setting process.
Yeah, and really, setting goals is setting the expectation, right? And the check-in is around like the feedback and the alignment and the continual like adjustment, right? So I think a good check-in has 2 things underpinning it: strong goals and hopefully development items or skills focus as well. So you're getting, that balance of both, performance and development or contribution and development. And yeah, we'll get into that as well as we go through each of those talent practices.
Okay, I think we're all set for right now.
All right. Moving forward, so goals. As I mentioned before, I think that goals really underpin performance. They provide clarity, they define the desired state. They really set the standard for what success looks like. We have a framework for what we believe is a well-written goal. It's the what, the why, and the how. So what are you expected to deliver, why it's important, and how you're going to achieve it. So a little different than a SMART goal methodology. We kind of went with this what, why, how framework. And, we've been, like many organizations, experimenting a lot with, some new AI tools. And so we've created some Gemini gems that help write goals in our goal writing framework as a support for workers in order to like really, adopt, goal setting quality. And really that's been a big focus this year as we launched our fiscal year, was really more rigor around goal setting and goal quality. And so getting adoption is always something that's keen, for us as HR leaders. So we have content on our intranet. We have on-demand workshops. We're really helping the individual understand how does their individual goal connect to our broader company strategy. And we do use OKRs at the company level that really set out like the big strategic goals. So, some screenshots here that show like what our intranet looks like, how we position goal setting, how we've used on-demand workshops to kind of help people engage with, what goal setting is, why it's important, how, it links to company performance, giving examples, right? This is what a well-written goal looks like in a product organization. This is what a well-written goal looks like for a marketing workmate, giving them those examples. And as I mentioned, helping our workmates, leverage AI in order to give them prompting guidance that helps them create these high quality goals. And my hope is at some point, some of that prompting guidance or AI assistance is built right into the Workday product itself. But until then, we're finding other ways to leverage that. So also in driving adoption, we oftentimes said, go set up goals and do goals, right? And, it takes a little extra brain power for people to like go into the system if they're not in Workday all the time to set goals or to leverage our technology. So simple things like putting tasks in people's to-do box, we found have, gotten a lot greater adoption. You put it in their to-do task or their inbox, and they take a lot more action than if we're asking them to go in and find, like, where is the goal setting and how do I do it? So this is an example of where we have our to-do task that comes at the beginning of the quarter. And it's complemented by a custom business process notification. This is where we're telling them, giving them a little more information around why it's important, how to do it. We're also encouraging development items at the same time, and really hoping that this involves the worker more in getting their goals set up. And then these tasks manually advance at the end of the goal setting period. Of course, people can go in and add, adjust, close out goals at any time. But as far as, prompting them, we're doing that at the beginning of the month of the quarter. And then at the end of that first month of the quarter, those tasks magically disappear from their Workday inbox. We've also turned on our org alignment to company objectives. This is in order to, increase that connection between the work that an individual does to the company's broader organizational objectives. So with a simple drop down, we have 9 company strategic objectives, and we have a list of those there. And we explain in our enablement that, you may have goals that are related directly to one of these 9 company objectives. You may have other run the business goals or functional priorities that your goals are related to, but this is just giving us another view on what people are working on and how much of the workforce has their goals aligned to our company's broadest strategic objectives. We've also, in our talent philosophy journey, are really working on accountability this year. So we have 5 what we're calling required actions. Goals are one of them. And we've been communicating about the system of accountability, where people need to understand what is that they're accountable for, right? So awareness is the first step, as it often is. They need to have the enablement to take action. They need to have feedback, right, on how they're doing. And then we need to have consequences, for those who are not participating as expected. We started talking about these required actions in October of last year, that they would be starting in our next fiscal year, which started in February. So a lot of lead up around why are these things important, the expectations that were going to be set. So again, the awareness and the action components, and now, providing them with resources, reports that help them understand, whether or not they're meeting the requirement. And then we have established some consequences for not meeting the requirement, which is that you will not be able to be assessed in our highest performance rating if you do not meet these expectations. For everyone, goals is one of them, as are check-ins, which we'll talk about next. And the third one is any required compliance training. Our people leaders are also responsible for completing required people leader enablement. Usually that's within their first 12 months, as well as taking action on performance concerns. But the screenshots here related to goals, really kind of show an organizational leader or a manager, like what percent of my team like has goals, what percent doesn't have goals. You can click right in and look at like, these are the workers who don't have goals, and really providing these simple reports and visibility to, are people meeting the requirement or not, is really helping to support the accountability and the behavior change within our organization. I believe this is my last slide on goals. So I'm going to pause here and just see, Brad, if we have any questions on goals.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few. So, and I think some you've touched on, but so one that came in was around how do you improve employee adoption of these HR measures via technology? Can you share some examples of kind of what worked and what didn't? And
Yeah.
highlight some of that, I think, with the AI tools and other kind of pushing it into
Mhm.
people's inbox, anything else that
Yeah.
drove adoption.
Yeah, and in addition to those, right, those are like simple things. And I found that putting stuff in the inbox gets done. There's a lot going on, and it's easy to be distracted. Um, we leverage also other communication vehicles we have. We have newsletters, we have Slack. So just getting it out there and having people talking about it. We've equipped, our organizational leaders to be incorporating this as an expectation into their town halls and other formats where they're meeting with their teams. Certainly our HR business partners are out there, following up. And so we've created just, I think more conversation about goals and the importance of goals. We did a company town hall when we kicked off our fiscal year with our strategic objectives. On that day that we had that town hall was the day that goal setting task hit the inboxes too. So just reinforcement in a lot of different mechanisms. I started my career in communications, and all those years ago, they said people had to see something, 5, 6, 7 times, to really understand. And I think we're in a world now where it's a lot more probably than 5, 6, 7 times, just because information is everywhere. But I think leadership from the front also with your frontline leaders, and having it not always be an HR activity also is one of the ways that we've gotten higher adoption.
Right. So, one of the questions is, since the goals tool is an open text box, do you give employees kind of a template to enter their information in? Like, do you kind of give them prompts on the what, why, and how framework, or is it pretty open-ended in terms of how they fill that out?
It's still fairly open-ended. With the gem that we designed in Google, we kind of trained it on our goal methodology, and I used it myself. Like succession planning right now is a goal for me, and I'd put in, what I hope to achieve, and it definitely rewrote it in the what, why, how framework. And then I had to, kind of pull out the smaller pieces of it, and, to fit it into like, what is the name of the goal? And then really the details was the how. And so really, form fitting what, the support I was getting using AI to put my goal into Workday. We've also had some groups that have downloaded all of their goals and run some additional analysis to kind of get a quality rating, like how many of the goals are really saying what is the what is the why, what is the how, and we're using that as like a continuous feedback, mechanism around, where do we need to inspect goals further. I also think that skip level goal audits can be really great. I did this within my own organization, kind of, downloaded all the goals, took the names out, kind of went through and redlined like how's the goal quality. So lots of kind of things you can do to continue to work on goal quality. I'd say last year was when we first started really putting out expectations around goals, even before it was required action. And a lot of that was just getting people in the habit, right? Getting people to just do that behavior. Like if we can get the behavior, which we saw we could, then it's really around increasing the quality.
I love this. And I had that question kind of in terms of how do you monitor and improve the quality over time? So I
Yeah.
love those solutions. Another question is around, do you track goal completion metrics to hold businesses accountable? You kind of showed, I think, where
Mhm.
leaders could click in to kind of see what their employees were doing, but is there something that's holding those leaders or the business units themselves accountable for goal completion or connecting them to other business priorities, et cetera?
Yeah, turning on the organizational alignment was a first step in really, strengthening the connection between individual goals and our company's broader key results. We are, kind of openly sharing information with our corporate strategy group that manages the OKR process to say, like, these are the goals versus on these different aligned to the different objectives and giving them statuses on what's complete, and really through operational reviews, like that's where as a enterprise the goals are looked at and evaluated, so we're complementing the OKR process with our individual goal setting process as well.
Mhm.
And just trying to make that more explicit. I think it's still, we're 3.5 months into our fiscal year, so like results are still a little early days.
Yeah, sure. Maybe one more. Have you measured kind of the adoption and what are the metrics that specifically you're looking at to kind of track success around adoption?
Yeah. Right now we're tracking activity. Right? How many people have done it, average number of goals per worker. We're getting curious. Are some people doing quarterly goals because their work is more quarterly in nature? Are other individuals setting long-term goals? The required action is to always have like active goals, which means, you can put in a goal that's an annual goal and, track it and kind of update it regularly. Or you could, every quarter set and establish new goals based on the type of work you do. So again, some flexibility, but more clarity on the expectation and the importance of goals is really where we're focused at this time.
Great. I think we're good for now.
Cool. All right. Check-ins, so you've got goals, hopefully development items as well. Check-ins are the opportunity to align on those goals, expectations, share feedback, get support in order to achieve success in your role. As I mentioned previously, we do check in 3 quarters, so Q1, Q2, and Q3. And really these are around those alignments and having the opportunity to talk about your progress on your goals and talk about what's happening in the future. So they're both a look back as well as a look forward. One thing happens here before the flow of the employee completing their check-in in Workday. Again, it's delivered to their inbox. This was a change we made last year, so no longer do people have to go in and type in the task to start their check-in. Again, they get that task on the first day of the last month of the quarter, delivered to every worker to do their self-perspective. So worker completes their self-perspective, they submit, it goes to their manager. The manager can start making notes on how the worker is doing, how they're trending as well from a performance perspective, which we'll look at here in a second. Hopefully they then have that live conversation as well to share feedback and align. The manager might then follow up or finalize their notes in the Workday task and then close out the form and submitting it. Just like with goals, when we launch this process, we have reports and dashboards that show us how people are doing. How many are sitting with the worker to take action, how many have moved to the manager's perspective, and then how many of them are complete. And we provide, that visibility to every individual people leader to know how their team is doing. And, organizationally as well. That's another tool that our HR business partner team uses for follow-up to say, look, we're only at 75% completion and we've got, only a week left in the quarter. We've got to really get, some of these check-ins moving through the process. So really simple perspective, simple workmate experience. And we've been with this really simple form now for our 2nd year. There was a time a few years ago where we were doing check-ins again. It was that inconsistent talent practice. There was a check-in form. Some people were using it, some weren't. And a lot of things got added to the check-in. And so the check-in started to feel really heavy because suddenly there was a skill assessment and there was, you're supposed to update your dev items, and we were doing a lot in the check-in form. I will also mention here that we do use the performance review business process for our check-ins, not the check-in business process. That is one technical thing I do know. And so that's the form that we're delivering here. And we made it really simple. We're asking for what are your contributions and what are a couple of things that maybe you would have done differently for the workmate's perspective. We're also asking them about their skills development and support that they need from their people leader or others. So they have one screen and they click submit and it's out of their inbox. To surface to the worker, though, the things that are relevant that they probably should be reflecting on while they're completing their check-in, we've turned on embedded analytics. So as soon as that task launches, this pops up and it's telling you things about, yourself. So it's telling you what are the skills for your job. We have identified critical skills for all of our job profiles. So that comes up. It also shows your contribution goals. It shows your development items. It shows you feedback that you've received in the system. So it's giving you that information in the flow of work or in the flow of doing the task. You can't update it or make adjustments. So we always encourage that people are updating their goals and their dev items before filling out their check-in form. We do that through our enablement and the notifications in advance of the process, but we keep the tool in the system, this business process pretty simple, and use these embedded analytics to support the worker in completing their self-perspective. It goes to the manager. The manager also will see those embedded analytics for the worker, so they can have that as a point of reference. The manager form is slightly more complicated. They've got 3 screens before they submit, but the additional 2 screens for the manager are pretty simple. The first one is a performance pulse. So in this screen, we're asking, how is the worker trending year to date? Are they above, meeting, below expectations, or are they new to their role less than 3 months? We're then asking them to give their perspective on performance and development. So they have the opportunity to see what the self-perspective was, provide their comments to that self-perspective. And then the very last screen that they see is asking them about performance concern and whether or not they have concerns about the employee's performance. We've used this screen for a while to expedite cases that need to go to our people consulting team that handles performance management. So they have visibility and know where they need to intervene and support people leaders who are having performance concerns. This year, we had these screens last year. These were the 3 different steps. We reordered them this year. We put the performance pulse first because what we were finding was a lot of managers were maybe selecting that the person was below expectations, maybe even marking as a performance concern, but their narrative in the manager perspective wasn't reflecting that. And when we go in to do performance management, one of the first things our people consultants are doing is they're looking at the check-ins and they're looking at the goals and they're, trying to understand how much of the expectation has been set and how much have we started to communicate and miss in expectations. And the check-in form is really one of the vehicles for doing that. So putting the performance pulse question first allows then for us to direct the manager to have their perspective be not just responding to what the worker put in their form, but to also be having their commentary reflective of how they believe performance is trending. So we get more of that evaluative feedback in the form. And then on the performance concern, we've clarified our language there to really make sure that people leaders understand that when they say they have a performance concern, 1, they're required to take action on it because that is one of our required actions for people leaders. And as well that, it's something that they don't feel is improving. It's not improving through coaching. They really need intervention at that point. They need to be working with someone in people and purpose. And so, kind of making that distinction, though there is some overlap with the performance pulse. Someone could be below expectations and not quite yet a performance concern, but we're also looking to see this trending information as we do this each quarter. All right, time to pause there. That's my check-ins section.
Yeah, definitely have a number of questions come in. One that came in earlier, but I think it's appropriate here because I think you just covered it. But what kind of rating scale have you adopted in Workday for performance? And I think you just hit on above, meeting, below. So maybe a follow-up question I'll add is why that scale? It seems pretty straightforward, simple. Was that really the goal to kind of keep it from getting too complex for leaders?
Yeah, and in some ways to the question that was asked in our next section is around our performance ratings. So this is a pulse. So we didn't want it to have the exact same words as the end of year rating, because we wanted to say like it's a moment in time. And then, you know, you have 3/4 of pulse information. So then you kind of know how have they been trending. But also our performance rating at the end of the year is a 3-point scale. And so we didn't want to have like a 5-point scale for the pulse and then have a 3-point scale for the end of the year. So those were some decisions that we made, design decisions around how do we, you know, make it different from the performance rating. And the pulses are not shared with the worker. That's really more for the manager to kind of have that more holistic view across the year. So you don't get to the end of the year and, you know, recency bias of maybe, you know, how the most recent performance overshadows the full year. So we made them distinctly different, but definitely related as well.
Maybe a follow-up I'll add is, you know, early you talked about one of the key goals was to drive greater differentiation. How does that align with the kind of 3-point scale? It would seem to me that would make it hard to create a bunch of
Oh,
differentiation if people are kind of bucketed into only
yeah.
3 groups. How do you work around that?
Yeah. Well, and this will be in the next section, so you're
I'm
when
jumping ahead.
when we're evaluating performance and potential, then we ended up having 9 talent intersections. So, and that's really where we get to more differentiation as well. But we do have differentiation across just the performance when it comes to the end of the year, 10% challenging year, 65% in the successful year, and then 25% in the exceptional year category on the performance axis.
Great. So maybe a broader question. You know, what surprised you the most, either positive or negative, as you kind of implemented some of these changes around the kind of goals and
Yeah.
pulsing and checking in with employees?
Um, Things that surprised me the most is, you know, workers not understanding the difference between contribution and development, or like what's a like business goal and what's like a development goal. So some of those things, and you know, so we really are reinforcing like the difference between the two, trying to make those things really explicit. So that's been surprising to me. I think also, you know, every organization has pushback. Workday is no different. You know, why do I have to have this conversation? I'm talking to the people all the time. And so, like, how do you just embed these things into your flow of work? Yeah, if you're having a you know, weekly one-on-one, you just carve out time in one of those regular one-on-ones in the month that we're doing the check-in, and you have a slightly more formal conversation. So I think it's really been, you know, how do you help people like engage with these talent practices in a way that doesn't feel like heavy HR administrative work? And I think that's the challenge, right? Like getting adoption for the right reasons. Like in some ways, am I happy that we now have this like required action stick? Yeah. But at the same time, like I don't want people to do these things because they fear the repercussion. I want them to do them because this really is, right? Like the hygiene of leading an organization and for high performance, right? Is to have goals and to like have feedback, right? And so we're trying to orient, you know, how we communicate about the importance and why we're doing these things back to the stuff that everyone wants, right? Everyone wants feedback. Everyone wants to know how they're doing. These are mechanisms to help them do that, and get away from the like, you know, stick mentality or, you know, this is required and you have to do it and HR is asking you to do it. Because it's really not for us. I mean, we love seeing, you know, how the organization is trending and how these practices are being adopted, of course, and how it relates to worker sentiment. But that's not like the, you know, the reason the value really is for the worker and for the people leader. One other thing that I would mention here on check-ins is our people analytics team a couple of years ago, and we had these ad hoc check-ins, right? Or that when it was more inconsistent talent practice. And after we do our check-in process, we generally send a survey out afterwards that asks them, you know, how it went. And our people analytics team did a very in-depth study around different things that maybe impacts people's engagement. You know, where they work, is their manager co-located with them, like all different types of factors they looked at. And one of them that they looked at was whether or not the worker had had an effective check-in, and using the data from our workers saying that they got value out of their check-in. And it was absolutely beyond any other factor, the thing that actually showed to have the highest impact on someone's engagement was having had a meaningful or effective check-in conversation. So I think the data proves out that these are the right things to do. And it's just how do we get people to do them? Because it seems like a no-brainer to me. And I'm a rule follower, so you tell me to do something, and generally I don't push back too much, but I'm not the norm in that regard.
So another question was, do you run into bottlenecks because the manager has to wait for employees to kind of submit their own
Yeah.
information before starting their evaluation?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And we used to have a check-in period. Last year, actually, it was like 2 months long. It was way too long. It felt like we were always in a check-in. And what we found through the data is that the bulk of the check-in activity really happens in like those last 7 to 10 business days. Um, and we manually advance the process after the month ends. And then, we have people, submitting tickets to our uh, people guide team saying, oh, the worker didn't do it till the last day. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to like better time management, like set expectations. And we tell, of course, or we enable on all the best practices, right? Tell your worker that you need them to submit their form to you 24, 48, whatever you need in advance before the scheduled check-in conversation. So I think some people are learning, right, that they need to actually like take control of this process. We considered having all of the worker forms advanced at a certain time to give managers time, but when we shortened it down to 1 month to really just, capture the fact that people were doing the bulk of the activity in those last couple of weeks, we thought that spacing it out for them wasn't going to help the whole enterprise overall. And we expect that our managers and our people leaders, they can set expectations around when they need the information so that they can take action. But something that, yes, it has been a challenge, and we continue to help our people leaders, set those expectations with the workmates that report to them.
Good. Maybe this is delving into maybe more technical, but I think you mentioned at one point they used the performance review versus check-in functionality, and the question is why? Why did you use one versus the other?
Yeah, we had a lot more flexibility. I think the check-in form is pretty like out of the box and doesn't have as much configurability as the performance review form. So that's my layman's understanding of why we went with the check-in form, was just that with the performance review form, is that we had more ability to do the different things we wanted to do, like the performance pulse and the concern that are not visible to the worker, in order to make the business process fit our needs.
Maybe one more. Do you have Skills Cloud activated for Workday for your workmates? Is that feeding into some of the analytics that you feed back to people?
We do have Skills Cloud, and we have been on a skills-based organization. We've got a journey. And so for all of our job profiles, we have 100% coverage of critical skills for jobs. That is one of those things that surfaces in the embedded analytics. It's one of the things that we're asking about when we tell people to think about or encourage them to think about a skill that they want to work on. We're telling them to think about a job critical skill. We're linking them to where they can find that job critical skill information on their profile. We're running some pilots right now to do some more explicit, like taking action after a check-in, development item, pick a skill. So we are seeing uptake in, people, one, understanding that we are a skills-based organization, what skills are important for their role, how they're taking development on skills. And then we're looking at, the intersection between performance and potential and skills, with an initial point of view that it's complementary information that supports performance assessments and potential assessments, but isn't a sole indicator of performance or potential. And is really, generally around, development, workforce planning needs, as well as we understand like our skill supply and our skill demand.
Well, there's a few more here, but I think we better let you get to performance and potential and confirmation, and maybe we can cover these if there's some time.
Yeah, the last section here, our third high impact practice. So 4 steps here: assessing performance, assessing potential, calibrating those assessments, and then what I think we all endeavor to do, which is making sure that we're taking action relative to where someone is assessed, right, and really meeting the worker where they are in their journey. So we talked about this a little before, the question earlier around, the performance pulse and then our performance ratings. So when we're asking our people leaders to assess performance, we're asking them to look at the goals and expectations, and then as well, of course, how are they demonstrating our behaviors, is their behavior in alignment with our values and action? And then they have the opportunity to select whether or not the worker has had a challenging year. So, inconsistent results, maybe not in full alignment behaviorally, successful year, they've achieved their objectives, again, reinforcing the importance of goals, or have they had an exceptional year, and have they really delivered above and beyond the expectations for their role. We also are educating and enabling our leaders to assess potential, recognizing that potential is forward-looking, right? It's a little bit more subjective from an assessment perspective. And so using this 3A framework, does the individual have the ability? And I of these 3A's, I think ability, is really kind of the leading factor of whether or not they can take on more different, projects, tasks, concepts, right? Do they show that ability? Aspiration, right? So, do we know what they want to do? Are they interested in taking on more? Do they, raise their hand for those stretch assignments, and actively show like their aspiration to contribute at a different level? And then also like their alignment, like how engaged are they, is their orientation and their mindset towards, the company's objectives and goals, and in service of, sustaining Workday's success in the market. That translates into 3 ratings as well. And you'll notice here, we don't say that someone is low potential or high potential, but what we are saying is whether you need to enable enroll, right? So still lots of room for growth and development in your current role, maybe, not expressing an interest to move into another area, grow, which is, we're seeing signs of, the ability to do more different, better things. The aspiration is there, the alignment is tracking well, or accelerate, like who are those people who are, really showing that they have this advanced capability or ability, showing, their desire to move, grow with the company, and really working like for the company's best interests, and really being advocates for the success of the company. So those are kind of our 3 rating scales. And I know there's a lot of controversy, or the 9 box can be a polarizing conversation. And we've always had a 9 box. And in some ways, or at least in the 7, actually nearly 8 years I've been at Workday, we had something that was a calibration task, using a 9 box. That presented its own challenges, because what we really did in our talent philosophy program was relabel and redefine the boxes of the 9 box. And so that change management for our more tenured leaders who were familiar with the concept of how we used to look at the 9 box, and having to kind of retrain them was a little bit of a challenge, but we've been able to successfully like meet our distribution expectation guidelines with the new definitions, and really have the organization like adopt this practice. Well, it kind of looks the way it looked before, like in a new way. And that, from a differentiation perspective, if you'll remember, is one of our talent philosophy dimensions. We, like I said, had a 9 box prior, but we weren't really holding a bar on the talent distribution in the different 9 boxes. One of the things that we've turned on this last year was the distribution targets, to make it a lot easier for people leader to understand, like, how is my calibration once the ratings are in, like how is it looking compared to distribution, so that they can make better informed decisions around how many people need to be in which parts of the intersections, and to be able to have just more meaningful talent review conversations. And we've said that this is an expectation, and we've actually had the last 2 years since introducing the new definitions, all of our like level 2 leaders that are the main organizational leaders, they've all met the distribution requirements within a couple 1 to 2 percentage points of the target. So we feel good about our ability to achieve distribution targets and the expectation being set there. And those targets came through conversations in partnership with our compensation team. My team is highly aligned to our compensation team because one of the main ways that this data does get used is when we come out of calibration, we move quickly into compensation planning and promotion review process. And so this information being used there to determine awards both on our cash corporate bonus program, as well as our stock investment rewards. And the bonus is more on the performance side, and stock is more on the potential side, but we have targets or ranges based on each of these talent intersections that show up in our compensation grid and help people leaders make those decisions when differentiating. We also provide our people leaders with a lot of talent insights and reports, right? We're really looking to leverage the check-ins and the goals that have been worked on throughout the year when they come to this end of year activity of assessing performance and potential. So using our people leader dashboard, we kind of customize it during this time frame to help them understand where was their last rating? What is the check-in status? How are they performing on performance pulse and performance concern? What are the development items? Kind of giving them access to that information so they don't have to go look in 500 different places to find it, really putting it all together in one place. We're also going to be leveraging the new talent highlights. It's an AI feature that's in the Manager Insights Hub. It summarizes, it looks at goals, check-ins, feedback, development items, and puts together a talent summary. So we're planning this year to use that as a new tool to complement, the people leader really having that broad perspective of how the worker has been performing. And, that talent insights is really only going to generate if people have been leveraging the check-ins and the goals and the development items. And so we're hoping that since we do have adoption of those other pieces, the goals and the check-ins right now, that we will see this through to having good talent insights that really help a people leader in making the performance and potential decisions when the time comes. So once we've calibrated, then it's time to take action. Of course, we provide guidance for each of those 9 intersections around what does development look like? What does coaching look like? We prepare our people leaders to communicate performance and potential and total rewards at the same time. So we give them narratives, scripts, and sample conversations around how to deliver a rating. Of course, those challenging year ratings are the ones that are generally most challenging for a people leader to deliver. So really making sure that they get a lot of support in how to have these conversations and communicate clearly with their workers. And again, we're not saying, you're a low performer or you're low potential, but we might be telling someone that they had a challenging year. Or that they are needing to be enabled in their current role. And so, takes a little bit of finesse to figure out how to have that conversation in a way where it lands with the worker and it's more, motivating. They know where they stand. We think that's really important. And so, taking those actions after performance and potential is really important. When it comes to development items, as Brad asked, skills, we have all of our job profile skills will pop up for an individual so that they can tag the development item that they're working on to a skill, whether it's a job profile skill or a core skill or any other skill, but really increasing our focus there on the skills component through development items. All right, I'm about to, wrap up here. I mean, we've only got a few minutes left. Time has flown by. So a few, results and outcomes that we've experienced since going on this talent philosophy journey is we have improved our goal setting. We've improved the adoption of those check-ins. We're at 94, 95%, like every quarter. So we feel really good there. We've also improved those perceptions about growth and development through our sentiment survey. And we do measure experience. We're constantly, measuring the experience. We actually pulse survey questions through Peakon every week. Usually around 4 questions are randomly being asked of every worker. And so we use those questions to gauge, my team uses it to gauge how are our programs landing. So in the talent management space, these are the questions that we're looking at. Do I know what I'm expected to contribute? Do I understand how my work supports the team? Do I get feedback? Am I growing? So these are the questions that are part of the standard Pecan question set that we're keeping a close eye on, and then we're able to look at it either as an NPS or as an average. We're looking at how do those scores vary by region or by organization or certain job families or tenures. And so, really able to kind of see where the hot spots are or see where there's success and like lean into those organizations and be like, you've got really high Pecan scores in these areas. Like, what are you doing and how can we share that, more broadly in the organization? Because I do find that, to that earlier question, like what works with adoption, it's getting leaders to talk to leaders about what they're doing that's working for them is way more like meaningful than, HR people suggesting what should be done or telling them what the best practice is. And that's all I had. So Brad, I know we're right up on time here, but is there a final question that you'd like to finish us off with?
Yeah, maybe a question or two to wrap us up. I mean, that came in was interesting. Somebody writes, "I noticed your language around the performance ratings less about the person's actions, let's say, met expectations, etc., and more around the type of year they had, challenging year, exceptional year." Was there something purposeful about that language use?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't want to put the label on the person, right? Like you're a high performer. So I think it's less about, we're trying to put it into language that we feel can be communicated in a way where like the worker understands where they stand and understand that it's reflective of the year you just had. And like it's not fast drying cement, as I had a leader say once to me in a calibration session, right? Like we should acknowledge if someone's had some struggles, right? Or maybe wasn't a top performer and have a way to explain that to them that doesn't feel like a personal indictment, right? And so we've attempted to use language that is more accessible in that way. And we get feedback that challenging year is hard, and some suggestions of changing that designation. I think it's always hard to deliver a message of someone that's, rated in the lowest rating.
Maybe just one more quick one. You assess potential at the same time you assess performance and then move into comp planning. So the question is, where does your succession planning process fit in this sequence of events?
Oh, wow. Well, do you have some time? We actually do succession planning in mid-year. So we're starting succession right now in June. That could change in the future. It's typically been an executive activity that happens in the summer months leading up to a board of directors meeting that happens like late September, September fall timeframe. We are looking for the next year to embed succession more in the performance and potential conversation, which would really be for our executive committee talent review. We do 2 talent reviews with them a year, one around performance and potential, looking at the VP population, one around succession. And we are looking to adjust that next year. So it really starts at performance and potential, and then the mid-year check-in, which we would still probably do in the summer timeframe, is really more of an accountability tracking progress on the conversations around successors that we talked about during performance and potential. So we are looking to like also bring those closer together, though they've historically been apart. So you can bet that that's one of my big goals.
Sounds like it. Well, I know we're exactly on the hour. So Roxanne, I want to thank you. It's been wonderful to learn about your kind of journey in this space. And I'm sure, judging by all the questions and engagement from the audience, I'm sure everybody's walking away with some takeaways they'll be able to use back at their own organizations. Would certainly like to thank all of you for joining us today for this CAHRS webcast. As I mentioned at the outset, we will be sharing out a recording and some of the associated materials. Would encourage you to share it with others who may be interested. And please do regularly visit our website. We'll be taking a little break as we often do over the summer, but we'll be within the next month or two kind of starting to build out our fall calendar, and would love to have you attend some of our events later this year. So with that, hope everybody that's here in the US enjoys the holiday weekend. And thanks again for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.